Hi everyone and welcome back to episode 2 of my new series, The 7-Day Soul on Sunday. If you joined me last week, which was episode 1, I just introduced the idea that I wanted to create a space where we can all kind of come together or in our own time, in the privacy of our own homes, just have a little bit of time on Sundays for reflection, how we're living our lives, how we want to live the coming week. And so I hope it's useful to you. So thank you for joining us. Last week I read out the poem by Galway Kinnell about that teaching us about teaching something its loveliness, and particularly we were talking about the beauty in the sow. It was a gorgeous poem, and it's well worth looking up if you didn't see it, or you can check back on the link for last week's episode. But that idea of seeing beauty in the unexpected, and the idea of teaching something its loveliness, which means showing somebody respect, maybe perhaps added respect, or listening to somebody perhaps describe something that maybe you don't really want to listen anymore to, or a bit of a long-winded story, and teaching that person their loveliness is through asking another question or showing interest or pretending interest in whatever. So I hope that was useful to you. This week I want to talk a little bit about mindfulness, and we'll be talking a lot more about it in other episodes. But talking about the kind of our rushed lives, and trying to see if we can constantly remind ourselves that the mundane aspects of our life are the practice ground for the person that we want to be, that it is doing the mundane stuff in our lives. Through those things, that is where we learn to kind of get better and to be the person that we want to become. In 1973, two Princeton universities set up a very interesting study. They were psychologists, and they set up a study using seminarians or men training for the priesthood. And they wanted to see if our different motivations, how they kind of came out, or what we thought were our motivations for life, how they actually affected us in real life, in kind of our hurried lives. So they had various groups of seminarians come to one building where they did lots of questionnaires about their personality and that kind of questionnaires, and also what were their motivations for joining the priesthood. Was it kind of to go to heaven after they die? Was it to do good in the world? What was it? Some groups were then told that they were actually quite late for the next talk, which was in a different building, and they were to hurry on over to the next building. Some of them were told that the next talk was on the parable of the Good Samaritan, where two religious people passed a man on the street who was begging and poor and perhaps dying, and the non-religious person stopped to help. So that was kind of to try and see if even just mentioning that parable would prime them or prompt those seminarians to actually help somebody. Other people were told that there was no rush whatsoever, take their time, dawdle on over to the next building, and others were told that, no rush, but you need to start moving on over there. So some of them were told it was about the Good Samaritan parable, and others were told it was just about getting jobs. So there were lots of different groups that the kind of researchers were looking at and comparing. And what they found, so what happened was that the researchers set up a kind of what's called a confederate in research, somebody who actually is helping the researchers. So between the two buildings was a man lying slouched in a corner of a doorway, and he was kind of moaning and coughing and groaning and aching and obviously in need of help. And they wanted to see how many of the seminarians in the rush would actually help this man. And what they found, that it didn't really matter on the seminarians' motivations of why they wanted to join the priesthood at all. What really mattered was how much of a rush they were in. So overall, 40% of people stopped to help in some way this man. Those who were low rushed actually helped the most. There was about 63% stopped to help the man. Not fabulous, I wouldn't have thought anyway, but still the most group that helped were the people that weren't in any sense of rush. The people who were told that they were on time but kind of to get on over there helped 40% of the time. And the people who were in a hurry helped just 10% of the time. So what the research found in this is that it's not really about what we want for ourselves, or our ideas of ethics and morals, it's a lot to do with how rushed we feel as to whether or not we actually live according to the principles that we want for ourselves and that we kind of hold dear to ourselves and want to live by. So just kind of like we kind of hold that in mind for this week in terms of, golly, I'm really rushed. What am I letting go of? I think that's kind of just a lesson for us all. So I also just in this, I just want to kind of end with a reading that I think is useful, and it's called In the Spirit of Mindfulness. And I think what it's really telling us is that it doesn't matter what we're doing in life. We don't have to be in a Buddhist hall. We don't have to be sitting cross-legged on a yoga mat. It doesn't matter what we're doing. It's to try and live the life that we are going to be living this week with a sense of mindfulness, with a sense of compassion, with a sense of presence, with the values that we want to live our lives by. So I hope you enjoy it. It's called In the Spirit of Mindfulness by Gary Schneider. It's from a book called The Practice of the Wild. All of us are apprenticed to the same teacher that the religious institutions originally worked with, reality. Reality Insight says, master the 24 hours. Do it well without self-pity. It is as hard to get the children herded into the carpool and down the road to the bus as it is to chant sutras in the Buddha hall on a cold morning. One move is not better than the other. Each can be quite boring, and they both have the virtuous quality of repetition. Repetition and ritual and their good results come in many forms. Changing the filter, wiping noses, going to meetings, picking up around the house, washing dishes, checking the dipstick. Don't let yourself think that these are distracting you from your more serious pursuits. Such a round of chores is not a set of difficulties we hope to escape from so that we may do our practice, which will put us on a path. It is our path. So I hope you enjoyed that, but it's a really interesting read, and in terms of just realizing that there is meaning in the mundane, which is something I always talk about, the idea of our everyday lives is our practice ground. It isn't, we don't need to go off to large retreats or anything like that. Life is our practice ground. So I hope you've enjoyed that reflection. Let me know in the comments what you think, and or if there's any other ideas or any kind of readings you'd like to share with everybody. And I'll see you next week. Take care.